The variety of surface types that you can create when painting with wax is part of the unique beauty of encaustic painting. Rather than suggesting that smooth, rough, two-dimensional, or 3D is better, let's explore one aspect together: how to apply wax for a smooth, flat surface. This is the one technique I am asked about the most by fellow artists and students. I like to think that my paintings are images of time and place compressed between layers of smooth, hand-worked wax. If you are just beginning your encaustic painting journey, or if you want to practice, use plain beeswax. Since these will be preliminary layers or test panels, save yourself the time and cost of using encaustic medium and stick to plain wax for this preliminary stage. Besides the time and cost, beeswax melts at a lower temperature than encaustic medium, allowing you to keep your palette or skillet at a lower temperature, around 170 degrees, rather than the higher temperature required to melt encaustic medium. Since it is a softer material, beeswax alone is also a bit easier to scrape. This saves time and energy. Since I've mentioned temperature, let's discuss safety. Only turn on your hot tools when you are planning to apply wax. No need to have hot wax in the studio all day, or a blazing palette if you are at a scraping, fusing, or mark-making stage. Turn the palette on to a temperature just enough to melt the wax, say 150 degrees. Resist the urge to turn the dial to high. Be patient. Smoking and burning wax is harmful to you and the integrity of your materials and tools. Make sure to have good ventilation. This means fresh air in and hot, waxy air out. I use 2 exhaust fans which vent out a window opening with small ducts. I keep my wax near the exhaust fans with an additional fan blowing over the surface and away from me and my main work area. For safety, I have all my electrical items, lights, heat, iron, and fans on one switch or power strip. When I leave the studio, I know everything is turned off. This seems simple, but turn the wax off when you don't need it. Make sure the panels you are using are rigid, absorbent, and heat resistant. Panels should be wiped clean so dirt or sawdust does not affect the surface. I work directly on birch plywood, which has a light color, a good porous grain, and is fairly lightweight. 1/4 inch plywood allows for nice heat distribution in small and large panels. You will want to use a larger brush for smooth surfaces. Small brushes are good for detail, but a soft, wide brush with natural bristles is best. The brush stroke is the most important part of a smooth surface. I call it a mindful brush stroke. Don't get into the habit of brushing back and forth unless you want to create texture. This allows the brush strokes to show and the wax is cooling on the brush. Practice loading the brush with hot wax. I suggest you use wax at 170 or 180 degrees. It should run off the brush easily as you pick the brush up out of the wax. To protect the edges of your panel from staining with darker colored waxes or materials you may use later, paint or dip the edges of the panels with plain wax. You can heat the edge and scrape off the wax when the painting is complete. I use a ceramic loop tool for this. I prefer using wax as a masking device rather than taping the edges. For the smoothest surface, apply a single stroke. Use firm pressure to release the wax from the bristles onto the panel. Reload the brush, which means to fill it with wax and reheat the bristles. If you are trying to create texture, do just the opposite, with multiple strokes and cooling wax. You can even lower the temperature of the palette or skillet. Smooth surfaces are best built in several thin layers. The first layer needs to be fused into the surface so that the following layers can appear. Again, the panel needs to be porous or absorbent. This could be a soft wood like birch, ampersand encaustic board, encaustic gesso applied to wood, or absorbent paper glued to a panel. Use a hot, smooth stroke and scrape any overlapping brush strokes with a scraper, ceramic loop tool, or razor blade. Fusing is nearly as important to a smooth surface as the brush stroke. When you fuse, you are bonding each layer to the previous one and smoothing the surface. I like to use propane torches and have a refillable tank in addition to the small blue propane bottles, which are nice for quick fixes. Butane works too, and the Iwatani torch head is great. These canisters are sometimes hard to find and ship. I stay away from heat guns as they use hot air to transport the heat, and this sometimes creates unwanted texture on the surface of the wax. Use a gentle, overlapping movement of the torch to heat the surface, just until you see it become shiny. Students sometimes are afraid to get the torch too close, that they barely heat the surface, or the opposite. They get too close and melt through all the layers, sometimes scorching the wood or ground beneath. Practice until you find the right distance and movement for a gently heated surface. Rotate the panel as you build up the layers. Otherwise, one edge is more built up, and the overlapping brush strokes show more. Pay special attention to the edges and fuse them a bit more, as they are the most fragile and tend to chip and break if not fused adequately. Treat this stage of the painting like practice. It takes time to develop an understanding of how heat affects texture and to know when the wax is at the correct temperature. If clumps form on the surface, the wax may not be hot enough. Sometimes the surface and the brush are too hot and you melt through the layers. Let the panel cool a bit before adding more wax. There is no need to rush ahead into introducing imagery or color. Practice using the brush, controlling the wax, and perfecting your fusing methods. Encaustic painting with finesse is extremely difficult. Take this time to become a master of your tools and materials. Otherwise, you will be at their mercy. This is a great stage to begin dreaming of the paintings you want to make and taking time to learn the tricks to pull it off. Enjoy.